Welcome back, everyone. Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating and, slightly dense academic white paper by Dr. Bachara Saheli. It's titled Toward a Maturana-Informed Viability Grammar. Now, if that sounds like a total mouthful, don't worry. Stick with me. I promise there's no pop quiz at the end. We're going to break down some absolutely profound ideas about how living systems, and we're talking everything from tiny biological cells all the way up to our massive global institutions, actually survive, adapt, and either flourish or suffer. This is an explainer that will literally change the way you look at the world around you.
So here is our roadmap. We are going to build this complex argument step by step from biological cells all the way up to civilization itself. We'll cover 1. The illusion of static living. 2. The organism and the medium. 3. Emotioning drives our behavior. 4. Words, worlds, and culture. 5. The biology of love. And finally, 6. A grammar for viability. All right, let's get started.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer structure of it. This viability grammar tree maps out the entire diagnostic framework Dr. Saheli has built based on the work of the brilliant biologist Humberto Maturana. It's a gorgeous visual anchor, and it proves we are working from a highly structured, rigorous academic foundation here. Just kind of keep this tree in the back of your mind as we climb from the roots all the way up to the branches.
Section 1. The illusion of static living, redefining how we survive.
This first major paradigm shift fundamentally redefines how we think about survival. Because, we so often tend to view living systems, whether that's a human body, a school, or a hospital, as static, isolated entities that simply persist over time. We think of them as objects that just sort of sit there. But as this profound quote from the paper states, living is not permanence. Living is conservation through change. I mean, wow. A living being, or a living institution, only continues to exist by constantly changing while conserving its core organization. It's exactly like a river. It only remains a river because the water is constantly flowing and changing. If it stops, well, it's just a puddle.
And that brings us to the steady drumbeat question of this entire explainer. What is being conserved here? Whenever we look at a person, a massive institution, or an entire culture, we absolutely have to ask what process, what relational pattern is actually continuing through all that constant change.
Section 2. The organism and the medium. You are not an island. Let's move along and explore how organisms actually interact with their surroundings.
We have to completely shatter a traditional assumption here. The old view tells us the environment is just this passive container, right? Like an external stage that just pushes the organism around and determines its fate. But the new, Maturana-Informed view shows us that the medium is actually a relational domain. The organism and the environment participate together, triggering changes in one another. They flow together.
In biology, this is called structural coupling. It's a dynamic, historical relationship of recurrent, mutually triggering interactions. And what's wild is how beautifully this applies to human beings. A child, for instance, can become structurally coupled to a fearful, chaotic family dynamic just as easily as they can become structurally coupled to a trusting, loving one. Their physical and emotional structures literally grow to match the recurrent interactions they experience. They wire themselves to their medium.
Section 3. Emotioning drives our behavior. Reframing action.
Now that we understand this biological coupling, let's scale it up to the realm of human behavior and see how this fundamentally reframes the way we act. We usually think of behavior as an isolated output, like something generated entirely inside your brain and then projected out onto the world. But actually, scratch that. It's more like a relational flow. Take a medical setting, for example. If a patient doesn't follow a doctor's advice, it's not simply that the patient is quote-unquote non-compliant. That behavior is a relational flow arising from an encounter. It might be based on a whole history of trust, fear, or dismissal within the medical system itself.
So the crucial point is how we redefine emotioning. In this framework, it is not a private, internal feeling. Emotioning is the relational domain that literally dictates what behaviors are even possible for you in a given moment. Think about it. A child who feels safe and is in a domain of play can explore, invent, and laugh. But a child who is under strict evaluation, trapped in a domain of fear, they literally cannot perceive those playful possibilities. Their entire menu of available behaviors physically shrinks. Section 4. Words, worlds, and culture. Scaling up to society. Let's move to and see how this builds from the biology of individual behavior to the sociology of massive human cultures.
The paper walks us across this precise, brilliant bridge.
First, emotioning frames our possible actions. Next, languaging allows us to recursively coordinate those actions with others. Then conversation braids our languaging and emotioning together into a shared reality. And finally, culture is simply the conserved, closed network of those repeated conversations. Essentially, culture is just a conversation that keeps living itself over and over again.
To ground this abstract theory, Dr. Sally provides this incredibly powerful, specific example of a healthy human niche for a child. For humanness to truly thrive, a child must be structurally coupled to a medium where they are held without fear, touched without violation, seen without humiliation, and corrected without their very being negated. This is what it takes, relationally, to conserve a human being.
Which brings us to a massive, civilizational test question. What conversations are our children being brought into? Seriously ask yourself, is our culture conserving play, curiosity, and mutual respect? Or are we plunging them into conserved conversations of fear, endless ranking, and performance anxiety?
Section 5. The Biology of Love, the Operational Metric of Survival. Fair warning here, we are about to take a very soft, sentimental word and treat it with absolute biological and structural rigor. Put away the greeting cards because things are about to get scientific.
We usually treat love as a private sentiment, a romance, or just a nice moral decoration. But here, love is redefined as the relational domain of behaviors where another being arises as legitimate in coexistence with you. And this brilliantly illustrates how love is a foundational biological necessity for human survival. Without it, the human niche completely collapses.
Now, be very clear on this. Love does not mean blind acceptance or the total absence of conflict. You can absolutely have conflict in love. Love simply means you can set a firm boundary or oppose a harmful behavior without negating the other person's fundamental right to exist. Aggression, on the other hand, aggression demands that you deny the legitimacy of the other person entirely just to win the conflict.
Section 6. A Grammar for Viability, Diagnosing Our Systems.
Now that we have this biological and cultural framework built on structural coupling and love, we transition to our final section, turning these insights into a powerful diagnostic tool. Returning to our core visual anchor, we can see how the author's diagnostic primitives, concepts like constraint, margin, and disturbance, map perfectly onto this tree. These aren't just abstract academic ideas, they are highly precise instruments for diagnosing the health of the systems we live inside of every single day.
Look at how incredibly practical these diagnostic questions are. If you are analyzing a school, a hospital, or a government, you don't just ask, is it working? You ask, what is actually being conserved here? You ask, when a disturbance happens, from what embodied history does the system's response arise? These questions cut right through the superficial PR and reveal the true structural reality of our institutions.
And you know, this is exactly why so many institutional reforms fail. True transformation cannot be imposed from the outside with a memo or a shiny new policy. Because transformation is not mere change, it is a new conservation beginning to live. A new conversation has to be genuinely lived long enough by the people inside the system for it to become the new culture.
I want to deliver this heavy-hitting quote to summarize the ultimate criteria of a successful, viable civilization, according to Dr. Sahali. A culture is life-coherent only if it conserves the relational conditions through which children become loving, self-respecting, other-respecting, playful, reflective human beings. If our systems produce all the wealth and technology in the world, but fail that test, they are simply not viable.
I'll leave you with this lingering, provocative thought to take into your own life, your workplace, and your family. What manner of living are you conserving in your relational medium, and does it keep life livable? Because ultimately, this diagnostic grammar ends right where your daily living begins again. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive, and keep asking the right questions.